It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Conversations with Joan. Conversations with Joan will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life's Conversations with Joan. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Conversations with Joan focuses on topics that are important to your life, from health and wellness to professional development to personal well-being. Change makers join me to share their insights, tips, and strategies so you can thrive and live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Now, let's start talking. Today's guest, Marie Quintana, experienced an emotional roller coaster when her family left behind everything that was familiar and embarked on an uncharted path to a new country. Guided by her faith and sense of purpose, Marie built a remarkable career, attaining executive leadership positions in some of the world's biggest corporations. She joins us today to discuss how she was able to create her identity in an unfamiliar life. Marie is the author of the book, Last Flight from Havana. Welcome, Marie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Joan, I'm so delighted to be here.
Marie, let's begin by talking about your family's journey from Cuba. What was life like that led them to flee to the United States?
Yes, thank you, Joan, for asking that. I was born in Cuba. My family, has lived in Cuba for many generations. And in the late 1950s, early 1960s, communism came to the country. And my grandfather was a landowner. In fact, he was the third largest rice farmer in Cuba. And at that time, they were seizing property, and it became too difficult to live in the country. My father had worked in the sugarcane industry and was actually coming to the United States during sugar season. So he was able to get a job in southern Louisiana in a sugar mill. And right after the Bay of Pigs, he decided that it was not safe for us to live in the country. So he first came to the United States and then asked for my mother, my brother, and I to join him. And we did that. We were very fortunate that we were able to leave Cuba on the last commercial flight from Havana that actually went to New Orleans, Louisiana in 1961. And so we left our family. We left my mom's parents, my father's parents, the country that they grew up in. And so it was really, a very frightening time for all Cubans. At that time, there were many families that were separated, children that were put on flights without their parents. And so we were the only non-Delta airline people on the plane that shut down Havana Airport. Later, they did start some charter planes, but this was the last commercial flight.
What is it like to leave everything you know, everyone you know, and, not know what you're going to be getting into, not knowing if you're ever going to see those people again? What goes through your mind, and what does that feel like?
It's fear. There's probably no other feeling like it because you're completely removed from anything that is familiar and obviously loved because your family is uprooted. I saw this through my mother's eyes. I was very fortunate. In fact, my mother is 96 years old today and still very aware of things. But she was able to tell me the story through her eyes, where she was a young woman in her early 30s, with her family, very, very strong, extended family, and that all of a sudden, she had to flee everything. And we were only able to take 40 pounds of clothing with us for the entire family. So there was really nothing that you can take. And you come back and you think, those things are material. They don't matter. What really matters are your family and the love that one has for each other. And many of the family members she never saw again. So, there's this feeling of lost. But I will say something, Joan, in all of these really dark times, there's also so much hope. And I think that's really what my story is about, is that, no matter what upheaval and, really serious crisis that you're going through, one of the things that I learned from my parents is this amazing hope and gratefulness. Because even though you're being uprooted and, everything is so unfamiliar, there's still this amazing gratefulness for every moment that you now have that moves you forward. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the strong inspiration, I think from immigrants that come to this country that leave everything behind and have to start over. Even inside of this sense of loss, there's this sense of hope and gratefulness that I think is so beautiful.
How do you think that experience shaped the person you became? Do you think it gave you some type of an advantage over other people who didn't go through something like that?
It shapes every single moment that I've had going forward. I was the oldest. So as a very young child, I had to learn English, and I had to be the one to translate the culture and the language for my parents. I believe that one of the things it did for me was allowed me to be able to know that I can go into the fire, and the fire meaning trials, and that I can come out on the other side. So I think, as you say, advantage, I think it's mostly knowing that I have been able to go through some difficult times before, and there will be difficult times in my future. And that no matter what, in the hardest of times, I will just know that there's hope and faith, and I will get through it. So I'm inspired that I can help others. And I've really spent most of my life working and mentoring and helping others to see that, whether it's a loss of a country, a family member, a job, different situations that we all go through, I am blessed. I feel blessed, even more than advantage, that I can bring them hope because I've seen it, I've been through it, and again, I've learned so much from my parents as they've gone through it.
You have achieved tremendous success in the corporate world, and while you were climbing that ladder as an immigrant woman, it was a different time than it is now. What was it like for you climbing that ladder, and what types of challenges did you face?
Very difficult. First of all, I've had so many different careers. If you looked at my resume, you would think, is this the same person? Because I've done everything from, started as a social worker, became a systems engineer, vice president of technology, went on to be senior vice president of sales and marketing, EVP of communications. I mean, all these roles don't mean anything, but what they mean is that I've done a lot of different roles and a lot of different jobs, and I've had to deal with a lot of ambiguity. It was very difficult. When I started my career, even at IBM, there were very few women in the field, and so you have to prove yourself. And one of the things I always did is that I went in, for example, at IBM as a systems engineer. I had a social work degree, so I came out as a master's in social work. IBM was hiring different people with different masters in liberal arts. They were going to teach you the engineering part, and you came in with more of the emotional intelligence. I wanted the hardest role they could provide me. I could have taken a marketing role, but I decided I wanted to be an engineer. So I looked at it, and again, I go back to my immigrant mentality. I wanted to take the hardest jobs. I wanted to learn from the ground up and prove myself. And so I did. I worked harder than the person next to me. In fact, I remember some of my friends going out to dinner to me saying, "You're such a nerd. You keep bringing all these binders with you to dinner all the time." But I just worked really hard. And so in every role that I took going forward in my career, I looked at it that way. I said, I'm just going to work really hard to prove myself. And one of the things I remember, a gentleman who was head of HR in one of the companies I worked for said, "Marie, all you're doing right now is you're focusing on your job. You're doing a great job, but you haven't networked. You're not networking. You're more focused at, what you're doing within your role." And that was sort of a light that turned on for me, that it was so important for me to also go out and build networks across the company. I became a speaker in one of the events. I remember one time, this is back in the early 90s, they came to me and said, Marie, you happen to be the highest ranking Latina. It was at PepsiCo. And I thought, really? I am? How do you know that? And so it was one of those times when, people didn't really look at diversity, because we were just working through the system. And when I realized that, I also realized a responsibility. And I started speaking. I started speaking about my story. I started speaking about, my family coming from Cuba. I realized that there were so many other Latinos and, just people of color that had gone through, different circumstances. And I felt such an accountability and responsibility for the people and for the employees and for this, for the culture of the company. And so it was such an inspiring time, Joan. I'll tell you that, I went through my career, I think, just learning on the job and growing and really just taking in and trying to be a better person, not just for myself, but for the responsibility and accountability to really help other employees.
Mm-hmm. So when you fought to achieve this success and work your way up, when it came time to think about having a family, did you ever think to yourself, I'm never going to be able to have children and continue in my role in the corporate world? What went through your mind and what ended up happening?
I love that you're asking this question. This is a great question, because this is in the 1980s, and this is when there were very few women on the job. And I remember distinctly what happened to me when I got pregnant with my first child. I was a systems engineer working for IBM, and I didn't want anyone to know I was pregnant because I thought that was going to hurt my role. Mm-hmm. And so I will tell you that I was almost 5.5 months pregnant, trying to squeeze myself into, these dresses. And I remember seeing a cross from a customer, and I still remember him, and I love him to death, but it's a long, long time ago. And he said, Marie, you seem to be gaining weight. And I realized at that moment, I need to tell him I'm almost 6 months pregnant. And, that was just, again, you couldn't be yourself. I mean, if you fast forward, and I love telling this story to, some of the, millennials today, because, today they're so blessed that they have all this paternity leave, maternity leave, and mm-hmm. people, can talk about this. But, women in those days, at IBM, you wear, the blue suits and the bow ties and the blue shoes. And I was very, very strict in following the rules of what needed to happen. I didn't feel comfortable talking about myself or, going through, being pregnant. So, but fast forward through all of that, I had 3 children. And it was difficult. I mean, I'll tell you, I was the breadwinner. I was the mom. I was the one who, took off when the kids were sick. I needed to take them to the doctor. I did have to have someone help me at times with the kids, but it was very difficult. Unlike, the kinds of benefits that you see today. I mean, I only took 6 weeks maternity leave off with my kids, and I had twins. It was a very different time. I'm so happy to see that times are changing for women in the workforce.
If you could talk to one of those younger girls today, what would be the advice that you would offer them about their career, about their family, trying to balance it? What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned and wisdom that you'd like to impart?
The first thing I'll say is that everything is a season. And so as they're going through, whether it's the career of, trying to make it to the next level, having children, whatever, you really have to look at it and say, the difficult times, this too will pass. And what's really important is, first of all, the relationship that you have. I mean, I think, in my situation, I was married to someone that, we ended up in a divorce. So really, really knowing the person that you're going to have a relationship with if you're going to have a family and get married. I think that's so important. I think your children are, in my mind, such a priority, right? It's such a priority. I mean, the role will be there for you. There's many women that I have talked to that, they have a child and decide they want to take a step back. It's okay to take a step back, to take 2 steps forward. It's a season of time when you may need to step out of working a 5 days a week. You might want to work 3 days a week, and you might want to be able to work different hours. And, I see women that are, moving very rapidly in their career, and they want to work, the 40, 60 hours a week and at the same time have a family. It's difficult. Those days go by so fast, Joan. I mean, I can remember, not being at the carpool all the time because there was no way I could do it. And I go back and I think, gosh, what I would give for one day of carpool, right? What I would give for one day of serving lunch in the cafeteria. Take the time to do those things. Those are so important. Your job is going to be there. I mean, those always is going to be an opportunity. So don't be afraid to take, like I said, a step back, to take 2 steps forward. It's a season of time. It's a season of time. And it's almost, and I'll relate it also to aging parents. I mean, my mom is 95 and, I've taken some time to be with her. And I've probably missed from some opportunities even now. And it's just a season of time that is so precious and so important to you. And so really get your priorities straight as in your relationships, in your children and your family, because I think that's really your priority.
So Marie, getting our priorities straight, do you believe that we should be living with our legacy in mind?
Oh, yes, Joan, absolutely. I believe in this. Every decision we make, every moment of the day is building your legacy. I mean, that's all you have, right? I mean, that's what it is. And so, again, be very mindful about those moments where you're having to make a decision one way or another, because that decision will lead you to 20 other decisions. And that will define you. It defines what your legacy is. It defines your family. It defines your next role. I'm very thoughtful, even more now, obviously, as I've gone through my life, to take a step back and not, make decisions that are, quick to make those. I try to step back and know that they have a lasting effect, and that is your legacy.
The book is Last Flight from Havana. If you would like to learn more about Marie and her work, you can visit mariequintana.com. Marie, in our final moments, what is the takeaway? What would you like to leave our listeners with?
I think the takeaway is to have courage, to be vulnerable, have courage to be authentic. And when I talk about vulnerable, I every moment, don't miss a moment. If there's a meeting and you want to say something, use your voice. If you are fearful about something, you've always been fearful about it, make a choice to take that risk, because that's what we have. And that, in turn, really is your legacy.
Marie, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you so much, Joan. I really have enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided is the opinion of our guest and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read our digital articles, and be sure to subscribe to our mailing list. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.